911, where's your emergency?
I've just spotted what I think is a tornado.
Tornado on the ground.
They're everywhere. Tornadoes are everywhere.
I got South tornado.
East toward West Liberty.
911.
Good evening and welcome in. I'm Tom Kenny. Calamity rarely knocks before it enters. 8 years ago today, it tore down the door of communities in Kentucky as severe weather swept across the Commonwealth, killing 22 people, injuring dozens more, and causing catastrophic property damage. The small town of West Liberty took a direct hit. ABC36 meteorologist Justin Roth went back there to talk to the survivors. This is their story, what they experienced, what they felt. This is West Liberty.
Personnel, EOC is advised to go to your safe areas. Again, EOC is advised to go to your safe areas. And Incident Command will advise you where they need you.
That's not paper.
A couple days in advance of March 2nd, 2012, we already saw that conditions were going to come together for a potentially major severe weather outbreak, including potentially damaging tornadoes.
The weather was warmer than normal, and I didn't think anything was out of sorts at all, personally.
Morgan County 911, where's your emergency?
This is Sandy McKenzie, and I've just spotted what I think is a tornado over toward the Woods Bend area, and it's moving fast.
In the Woods Bend area?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's moving, though, to the east toward West Liberty.
The east towards West Liberty?
We were placed in a high risk, which is the very highest level of risk for severe weather. And they only issue usually a couple of those, a handful of those on any given year. So that's a very unusual, and especially unusual for our part of the country. Very, very unusual for our part of the country.
West Liberty Police Department, this is Heather. West Liberty Police Department, this is Heather.
My mother-in-law at the time lived up in Alexandria, so we knew there were reports that a tornado could be going up into Alexandria, or in that area. As a matter of fact, we thought we saw it right over Alexandria, and we were calling her and telling her, you need to get in the basement.
They're everywhere. They're everywhere. Tornadoes are everywhere. Oh my God.
The atmosphere was right for severe weather. The instability was there. The wind shear was there. The moisture was there. And we were very concerned.
Just get to a safe place. 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 Get to a safe place, ma'am.
We went out and walked the Old Mill Park and were just kind of joking that it seemed so calm. There wasn't anything going on here.
There were reports of people trapped in West Liberty about 45 minutes or an hour ago, and that's a really, really nasty situation there.
I would have never guessed that on a given year the longest track tornado in the United States would occur in eastern Kentucky, but on that day it did.
Tornado on the ground here at the intersection of 172 and 460.
Well, if we'd gone to the basement, why not want to? All right. Now, guys, let's go. That's not clouds, that's stuff.
I look towards the street through a window from the dispatch shack, and I can see items in the air going from my right to left that shouldn't be too big to be, shouldn't be like doing that.
Coming over Wells Hill was this big, massive looking cloud. And I'm in my mind still not thinking, well, this is not a tornado. You know, tornadoes don't come into West Liberty.
I was just looking straight on at it, seeing the tornado come up over the hospital. And there were some guys that had been working out in the basement, and they're standing out there taking pictures of this thing. So I pull up and I'm talking to my wife. About that time, I said, look, see, there's a tornado, and it dropped out. So, of course, she was worried about that, but I said, boy, is that a tornado? And they just laughed and said, yeah, that's a tornado. I said, where do we need to go? And they were working out in a basement. So we all went down there. As soon as we got down in the basement, the lights went out.
The next thing I know, the electricity goes off, and I hear this roaring. It sounded like a freight train. And, you know, I have patients here. My mom's here. She was a patient that afternoon. We've got a new patient, her husband, and then 2 of my coworkers. So I ran to the back door. I looked out towards town, Main Street, and I see this huge funnel cloud, huge. And I saw it rip a piece of metal off of one of the buildings and wadded it up like a piece of paper. And this thing's coming towards me, and I'm trying to get back in the building, and I can't.
Very strong what are called rotational velocities, and that shows the rotation within the thunderstorm. And then we also got what we call a debris ball. There actually was enough debris being lifted into the air that we got radar return, a signal from that.
There it is! Right there! And while we're in the stairwell, something below us, a door or something gave away, and the tornado began to come up that stairwell. I decided I don't know what's going on down there, but I don't want to be there. So I came back upstairs, and by the time I got to this area, it was over.
The wind was so strong that I couldn't hardly move. So finally I did get back in, and we all got into the dark room in the x-ray lab. And there was 5 of us in that small closet, and I was up against the wall. I could feel the concrete blocks shaking. Finally, it was over.
When I came back to myself, I was standing 20 foot from the edge of a 100-foot drop-off. Well, I held myself up with a 2x4. And then that's when I turned around and I seen my dad and grandmother, but I didn't get to see my mom because she was covered up with debris.
I'm between Eastville and Wellington.
Uh-huh.
And I got caught in a tornado or something.
Okay, are you hurt?
Yeah.
We came out. First thought was, oh my goodness, Dr. Smith. You know, I knew he was upstairs. And we got him down. First thing he said was, call somebody. I said, who do you want me to call? He said, I don't care who you call. He said, just call somebody. I don't think he ever really realized that a tornado had hit.
And I looked down to the left, and the Methodist church steeple was in the intersection. And I thought to myself, we're going to have lots of dead folks.
So we waited a couple minutes and we went out. There's my Suburban. Looks like you'd just taken a machine gun and shot it up. Smoke coming out of it, all the windows busted out. And where that place is located, you could look down over Main Street. And that's the one thing you're thinking. Is this a dream? You know, is this really happening? And it's just amazing the amount of destruction. And from there, what was in my mind was to get back to see what kind of shape my clinic's in and my family.
For me, it felt like a split second. But from the description of neighbors, it was at least, you know, a minute for it to hit us. And then that's when it took him to come over Woods Bend area, and then hit West Liberty.
If you just talk about the wind coming through, I'm going to say a few seconds. If you're talking about panicked people coming in, you're going to add some time to that. You know, minutes total, and the seconds for the wind.
The shaking and the roaring, less than 5 minutes. It seemed like an eternity, but in reality, it wasn't that long.
That's kind of what it looked like, was the tornado debris you see in all these pictures and clips, and I thought, oh God, we have had this is what's happened. So I saw him running, and I told my wife, well, I'm going to go up here and check on Mom and Dad and Billy and, you know, it's my brother and his wife. And see what's happened.
The destruction of the property was, I guess you could call it catastrophic. It took and completely destroyed our home, destroyed my brother's home. We had 3 horses that got killed, one that was injured, and then the physical damage that it done to him, you know, not only physically but mentally. That was, I mean, it's just something that I wouldn't wish on nobody.
Based on the strong rotational velocities we saw in those storms, I actually, as terrible as the damage was, and it was devastating, I actually expected the damage to be worse than it was.
Well, I can say that Main Street was just destroyed. Buildings that had been there forever, restaurants that had been up there forever, just leveled. Commercial bank was hit hard. Christian church that my mother used to go to a long time ago was demolished. And a big thing was all the electric poles and lines, they're all down.
The last thing I remember hearing my dad say before he passed, because my dad was still alive, was that we got to find Sue, which was my mom.
Then from there, it was just unorganized folks trying to help folks. And hours later, professionals from Jessamine County and Fayette County, we had help from Moorhead, arrived, and the professional searchers began to search.
Trailer frames, like the walls of the trailers and everything was just demolished. There was nothing. The siding was twisted up into bundles. There was tin up in trees. The trailer frames themselves was twisted, looked like, I mean, there ain't no way no mankind could have done nothing like that.
I immediately thought there's probably going to be 100 people killed in this. And I'm going to start finding out, and I'm going to start finding out people that I know are dead, because there's no way we could have. There's no way that all this destruction, and you just see the path where it went up Prestonsburg Street. I mean, this happened at 6 o'clock on a Friday. There's a lot of people in town, and there's no way there can't be 100 people killed here in this. And you just start praying.
One of our firemen jumped on a bulldozer, a little case dozer, to clear out a path from here up to the hospital without any direction. And that same fireman turned off the main gas line that was spewing.
I heard people, you know, talking around me. Heard people coming towards us. My neighbors beside of us was the first ones to us. And after that, I mean, it's all just been a big blur.
The first thing I remember hearing when I came out was silence. And then it was like reality set in for a split second, and there were people screaming, there were people crying, there was telephone poles down, electric poles, cars turned upside down, and you know, I'm standing back and I'm looking at the clinic and I'm thinking, oh my God, how will we ever recover from this?
I went into mode to help folks for what little ability I had to do to assist, but I went looking to see what I could find.
I saw the dome of the courthouse was gone. All the the stores were just in shambles, and I knew my office is going to be destroyed whenever I go down there and look at it. I went up on the south end of town, walking to the north end of Main Street, and sure enough, when I got there, it was all, it was destroyed.
Crews from the National Weather Service spent part of today in several Kentucky counties.
you know, the damage was just devastating. And the thing that was amazing was just how continuous it was. It's so different than most surveys any of us have ever been on, where it's very isolated. You have a brief tornado touchdown, or maybe a very short track tornado, but this was just continuous. And that's the reason the surveys actually took several days, because you're talking about dozens and dozens and dozens of miles of ground that these tornadoes cover.
Things that happened after we came here is we were asked to coordinate a day of work for United Methodists to come from across the state to do work here in West Liberty. And so my wife and I took responsibility for that, and we had, I think, 125 or 130 people that worked in various projects, cleanup, rebuilding, all those kinds of things, shortly after we came here.
The jailer and his wife kind of kept an eye on Dad, and we had to come back up every morning, check on that kind of stuff. He lasted about a week, and I'm guessing it's a shock of not knowing where stuff is upstairs, bathroom, bedroom, kitchen, that kind of stuff. He was just out of his element. And then both funeral homes were damaged, and it took us 2 weeks to have a funeral.
The first phrase that came to mind was, it looked like a war zone. There was so much damage that was done, buildings that had been destroyed. Next door to us over here is Rite Aid Pharmacy, and that building had taken significant hit. It was back in business, but it was severely damaged. And driving, there are two major streets in West Liberty. One is Main Street and the other is Prestonsburg, and they come together as a T. And both of them sustained terrific damage, especially Main Street, and then a number of buildings on Prestonsburg as well.
Been around a lot of years, so I've had several blocks, maybe all the blocks of the NIMS training. And that did not serve me, I'm going to say, at all that night. However, I do believe that training served the others, professionals that came in to get us back on our feet. I think it was very helpful for them. But at the time when the bricks have fallen and there's nobody, there was nothing I could bring to the table to assist the community except what my two hands could and legs could do. We just didn't have, we just didn't have anything.
This is my partner and me. We salvaged our sign. We found our sign, and my wife took this picture of us as we were up there trying to dig out.
I would imagine that the corners were not bent like that.
No, we had to kind of dig that out of under some brick.
I didn't actually lose anything that couldn't be replaced, but I did, deal with nightmares for a while after that. It's scary to go through something like that. Mother Nature can really take control.
I mean, I was hit hard, but my business, but personally, it wasn't that bad for me, and I know it was a lot harder for a lot of other people, and then you just kind of feel guilty that you can't help.
Yeah, my mom, dad, and grandmother. I mean, all the other things was material. That can be replaced, but the life of my family could not.
When we hear severe weather is on its way here in Morgan County, people get really antsy, even though it's been over 7 years since the tornado.
Yeah, it's made a big difference here. When people get weather reports, we're a whole lot more attentive to weather reports now that we know a tornado can hit here.
The only time that I really get freaked out is if the wind picks up. I can sleep through a thunderstorm now. Compared to seven and a half years ago, no, I could not.
You hear that little siren go off on the radio, you're looking and listening and watching, and yeah, you're concerned.
I think we have every app that you can download on both our phones. And still to this day, if we hear of bad weather, last. So what'd you hear on the weather? What'd you hear?
And we just knew that this was going to take a long time, and we were just going to have to tough it out. And there's just times you just, what do you do next? Well, you just put the other foot in front of the other foot, and you just go on, because you just really don't know what to do.
Got nowhere else to go. This is home. I practiced here since 1981. I grew up upstairs. That was my residence.
This is my hometown. This is where I was raised. The town didn't give up on me, so why should I give up on the town? People come together and helped us in ways that would make you think, people really do care.
911. 911. 911. Hello?
The images are incredible, to say the least. I'm here now with ABC36 meteorologist Justin Roth, who put that story together. Joining us also Jonathan Guzman, warning coordination meteorologist with the National Weather Service out of the Jackson, Kentucky office. And Justin, I've been back right after it happened. I've been back on anniversaries, and there are still places in West Liberty that look like this hit yesterday.
Yeah, when I went to West Liberty several times to interview several survivors, and there are plots of land that have just been overgrown with vegetation just because people couldn't rebuild.
Right. Now, make no mistake, they have done a remarkable job
really
of rebuilding, but the scars, both physical and emotional, are there.
They absolutely are. Now, Jonathan, I want to talk a little bit about that outbreak in general. So, obviously, West Liberty was hit very hard, but can you talk a little bit perspective-wise? This wasn't just a West Liberty tornado.
Yeah, certainly. There were 18 tornadoes across the state of Kentucky that day. Salyersville was also hit with an EF3. East Bernstadt down in Laurel County, north of London, hit with an EF2. And then it also spanned other states. Henryville, Indiana is very well known about EF4. And then Ohio, Tennessee were also hit that same day. So, yeah, not just Kentucky, but we were certainly in eastern Kentucky hit hard.
Right, right. And obviously, if we kind of go back to just the West Liberty tornado, as I said, West Liberty was hit hard, but that particular tornado on the ground for several miles, and it hit several counties as well.
Yeah, that went east. Lawrence County actually went into West Virginia, and was referenced there was the longest track tornado in the country that year, 86 miles. So pretty astounding for that to happen in eastern Kentucky.
Right.
And we also used to think the West Liberty area was perhaps immune from a direct hit like this from such a powerful tornado, because they thought there was maybe some insulation from the Licking River and also the topography with the hills and the mountains. 8 years ago today, that was proved wrong.
Yeah, certainly. We hear that a lot, kind of a misconception that the mountains terrain tend to block tornadoes. They can't happen there. So while it's certainly, as we've seen, infrequent here, it can most certainly happen as it did on this day. So that's why we stress, even in the mountains, Justin, ourselves, when we go out and do outreach, prepare just as you would if you're, say, out in the Great Plains, because it only takes one event to really cause devastation.
So we just so happen to be doing this special about West Liberty, and we just so happen to have a tornado watch in effect in western Kentucky. Can we go ahead and talk a little bit about the difference between watches and warnings? I think it's so important to talk about.
Yeah, a severe thunderstorm or tornado watch, in coordination with us, is put out from the Storm Prediction Center in Norman, Oklahoma, and they're typically a larger area. And when you see one of those put out, it means be prepared that conditions are favorable. And then when a warning is put out, that's put out by your local National Weather Service office. And when you see that, that's when it's time to take immediate action. Get to your place of safety, have your plan in place ahead of time during the watch phase. When a warning's issued, do it. Get the safety now.
Right. And we have the graphic up on screen there. And what about an emergency?
And an emergency is going to be an extremely dangerous situation where we have a warning out, but an emergency is where we have confirmation from a spotter on the ground or an emergency manager perhaps that there is an actual tornado occurring, or such as we saw with West Liberty, if we have what's called a signature on radar, a debris ball, where we can actually detect debris being wafted in the atmosphere. That's another case where we may issue an emergency.
Okay. So, of course, it's Severe Weather Awareness Week right now, so very appropriate that we're talking about something like this. What about safe locations in your home?
So the safest place certainly to be is a basement, if you're able to have one underground. If not, somewhere interior, away from any exterior walls and windows and doors and such and glass. And if, say, certainly underground, if you go to storm shelter, it means that's the best way. And we really stress, too, if you don't have access to somewhere, so say if you are in a mobile home, have a plan in place ahead of time early on in the day to get somewhere that does have a more substantial and safe structure.
So as we look at the tornado safety graphic here on the screen, everywhere there in green is your tornado safe location right there, obviously, and you want to stay away from those windows always.
Yeah.
What if you're in a car? You hear sometimes conflicting, what should you do? Do you stay in the vehicle or do you get out and go to the lowest lying area on the ground?
So if you're in a vehicle and that vehicle is hit by a tornado, it's a very dangerous and one of the worst places you can be. It's easily to be lofted, especially by tornadoes as strong as we saw 8 years ago. And if you can't get somewhere inside a substantial structure, shelter, somewhere with a basement underground, again, making plans ahead of time to make sure that you're not caught out on an open highway or interstate where you have nowhere to go if a tornado does occur. So really kind of looking at planning ahead phase. Kind of a last resort if you are, say, out in the country in a field would be to get into a ditch, but you really have to kind of know your surroundings. If we're getting torrential rainfall, you don't want to put yourself in harm's way if we're seeing flash flooding at the same time.
Right. So on top of Severe Weather Awareness Week, we have a tornado drill statewide happening on Wednesday. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's something the 5 National Weather Service offices that serve Kentucky, we actually all issue a test tornado warning. So what we encourage there are schools, locations, businesses to receive that via NOAA weather radio, and then basically put your emergency action into place at that point as if a real warning were issued, just to practice it. So it's at 10:07 a.m. on Wednesday morning there. Weather looks good, so we shouldn't have to postpone it. So just basically, again, have your plan in place, talk it over with your family, friends, whoever, and then put it into place and implement it that day as a good practice measure.
Yeah. If you're one of those people who says, it will never happen to me or never happen to my community, that's what a lot of people in West Liberty and Salyersville and other places thought.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Jonathan from the National Weather Service, thank you. Justin Roth, thank you so much. And thank you. Be weather aware.